All right, Matthew chapter 8. Like I said yesterday, we come down off the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus moves into the cities healing people. And here's what Matthew is showing by the construction of this gospel. Because gospel writers don't write like biography writers write today. They don't just start at the beginning and go to the end and just everything's chronological. They group things into themes to teach concepts. I personally think it's a much more interesting way to read and learn about someone's life rather than, I mean, how many people read a biography and think it's boring? And typically they are, because it's just like you have to go through so much to be able to learn about these people, and it's just all the way in order. And usually their life doesn't get exciting until much later in life. So you got to work through the first few chapters. Well, Matthew puts things together to teach certain ideas about Jesus, and he takes it from all over his life. And so he makes it, now his goal is not to sell copies and make it exciting necessarily. It's to reveal the truth of who Jesus is so that people are 100% clear about who Jesus is and what he taught. And so that's Matthew's goal. So you say, well, Matthew's gospel isn't exciting for me. Well, what are you looking for? It's not a midnight thriller. It's the words of life that help you, one, get your eternity straight, and number two, help you grow in righteousness so that you have assurance of salvation and joy. So anyways, we come off of this great teaching, 3 chapters of great teaching, and even the crowds were astonished at his authority that he showed. That's what it said in the last verse of chapter 7. And now we move into chapter 8 and 9, and it's going to be nothing but miracles. And the miracles are attesting to the truth that comes from his mouth. So I say this a lot, but the Gospels are about Jesus's words and Jesus's works. Words and works. We just got a bunch of words. Now we're going to get a bunch of works, and the works back up the words. So mostly what we get here are healings and miracles. First one is he cleanses a leper. A leper is someone with a skin disease that all throughout Israel they had had leprosy, which could have been a bunch of different skin diseases, but basically it's a death sentence. And so what would happen is someone would get leprosy and they would be cast out of town until if their leprosy cleared up. And now if it was true leprosy, what we call leprosy today, it doesn't clear up, but they would call other skin diseases leprosy as well. So they would get placed outside of town as an outcast. They weren't able to worship God anymore because they couldn't go to the temple. They weren't able to be with their family. They were a legitimate outcast. And if they were to touch anyone, then that person would become unclean and they'd have to go out too. So it's like their disease would spread. And it really represents sin. And so what happens here, um, this leper approaches Jesus, approaches God, and says, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus, here's the key thing that Matthew wants us to see, is that Jesus stretches out his hand and touches the leper. This is huge because Jesus is not afraid of the disease transferring to him, but Jesus is actually transferring his cleansing power, his spirit to the leper. And that's the power of Jesus over disease. So Matthew is showing that. Now look at the next one. Jesus shows he has power over sickness by the centurion. Centurion was a Roman guard. Luke says he probably helped build the temple. And so he was someone who respected the Jewish customs, though he wasn't a Jew. And he asked for Jesus to come heal his servant. Shows that he has great care for his servant. We see compassion there. So he's a good guy. Um, And when Jesus says, I'm going to come, I'll heal him. He says, no, you don't have to come because I'm not worthy to have you under my roof. I'm a Gentile. I don't deserve it, but I know that you're powerful, and I know that if you just say it, it will happen. And Jesus marvels at him and says, I've never seen such faith in all of Israel. There's only two times that Jesus marvels in the gospel. It's right here, and it's in Mark chapter 6 when he marvels at Israel's unbelief. And so, what matters to Jesus, I don't know about most, but what matters to Jesus a lot is someone's faith. He marveled at the centurion's faith, and this faith that the centurion had is what prompted Jesus to basically put him on display and then go and heal the servant. Now, he doesn't go there, he just does it. He just says the word and it was done. But he's marveling, basically saying, look, even the Gentile gets it. So here's, remember we're reading this through Jewish lenses. Jews would see this and be like, wow, Jesus, first he heals a leper who's an outcast, doesn't belong to Israel really anymore. They've given up on the lepers. Then he heals a centurion's servant, the lowest of a Gentile, a servant of a Gentile. They don't deserve this, but even the Gentile understands that it's God's sovereign decree to heal, to forgive sins, to bring people into his family, and he gets it. And he says, "Look, I know if I just believe, you're going to do because you're good." And that's why he marvels. And that's what Israel doesn't get. Israel thinks because they do, they get. Or because they are a child of Abraham, they get. But Jesus says, no, it's faith. It's faith in my goodness and who I am. That's what gets you in the kingdom. And he promises judgment to those who don't have faith. Then we see Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, who was lying sick with fever. So we see him and his power over disease with the leper, and sickness over the servant, and now sickness again. And it's a small sickness, it's a fever. Um, but he touches her hand, and immediately the fever leaves her, and she gets up and serves him. Like, this is a grade A healing. This is how Jesus heals. This is why I don't believe healings in this way, especially by people, are going on anymore today. This is something very unique to this time when Jesus was here and his apostles were here. And not to say that God doesn't heal people, of course he does in his own providence. We all have a story of someone we know who was healed, but we don't have miracle workers or healers like the apostles in Jesus, where they lay their hands on them and immediately the disease leaves and they're good to go. And so this is what happens here. It's an incredible healing, but once again, this is a woman. She's not a main character in the narrative, but Jesus heals her, and Matthew includes it in the story. And so he's for the leper, the outcast. He's for the Gentile. He's for the women who were looked down upon in this society. Jesus is for everyone, and you got to have faith. We see that he fulfills a prophecy in Isaiah. He took our illness and bore our disease. That was in verse 17. Now, Matthew takes a little break here and shows us responses to these miracles. The scribe says, hey, I want to follow you. And he says, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. In other words, are you sure you want to follow me? Because life ain't easy out here on the miracle road. Life ain't easy being a gospel worker in this town when nobody believes. And everybody is just coming around to have their friend healed, but nobody wants to hear it. Like, it ain't easy to follow me. Are you sure? And someone says, yeah, I'm going to first go bury my father. That was like a week-long process, and they were going to go back and take care of that because they thought that was good. And he says, let the dead bury their own dead. Let the unsaved worry about worldly affairs, and you come worry about spiritual things. Wow, what a charge. And I think every single one of us need to wrestle with the idea of what is it costing me right now to follow Jesus? Or am I doing it out of convenience? Because if it ever gets hard for you, then how do you know you're going to last? So what is it costing you? What has it cost you in the past to follow Jesus? All right, so moving on, we have Jesus calming a storm, showing that he has authority over nature. So he has authority over every disease and sickness. Now it shows he has authority over the wind, the seas, the weather, everything. He rebukes the disciples for having such little faith because they were so afraid when the winds came. He's essentially saying, you should have known I was going to take care of you. And when he rose and rebuked the wind and the seas, it wasn't like they just slowly subsided. This is where the miracle comes in. I mean, it went to immediate calm. Like, that's impossible. Weather doesn't work like that. Jesus has authority over all of nature. R.C. Sproul used to say, there's no maverick molecule, meaning Jesus has authority over every single molecule and atom in the universe. And at all times, it's in his mind where all of them are and what they're doing, and he is controlling them all. Now, how that works with free will is a mystery, and we don't have time to get into it here, although I'd love to, but I'm sure it will get brought up at some point. So Jesus has authority over nature. And lastly, we see that Jesus has authority over the spiritual realm, the scariest unseen realm. It's one thing to turn a mountain upside down and calm a wave and cause the rain to come. It's another thing to have control over the dark and evil satanic forces of the world. Jesus, too, has authority over them. Now, he's in a Gentile country. The demons are in these two men, and they say, don't torment us before the time, which is the last day when Jesus will throw all of demons into the lake of fire. And Jesus listens to him. I don't know why. It's probably to show and display more his power, because he could have just snapped his fingers and they're gone. But he wanted to show the power of sin. So he puts them into pigs, and then they run the pigs off the cliff and kill them all. That's the destructive power of sin on display. That's why Jesus does that. But in that, he also shows his power over this legion of demons, which is like 2,000 demons or something like that. So that's why he does it. And why does he kill all the pigs? That's so mean. Well, first of all, it's not mean for the creator and author of life to take life. I mean, he can do it. It belongs to him. Second of all, the pigs are dead, but that's why they were raising them to die, so that they could eat them. Pigs jumping over the cliff could still be harvested in the water. They could just go get them. And second of all, God's glory is more important than animal life or human life. Why did an Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5, why were they killed for lying about money? Because God's glory is more important than their lives. And that's one thing we miss so much in our American Christianity, is how important God's glory is over everything else. That's why the Lord's Prayer begins. We're going through this at church. This is like sermon number 5 out of like, he's probably going to go for like 10 or 12 on the Lord's Prayer. Simple 6 statements in the Lord's Prayer. The first one, um, hallowed be thy name. That means holy. That means set apart. That means God's name needs to be glorified. That's the very first thing in the prayer that Jesus gives to his disciples. And so that's why Jesus does everything he does for the glory of God. It's a simple answer. There's more to be said about it, which I said some of that. But here's how Matthew ends this chapter. Now, Matthew didn't write in chapters, but that's why we have a chapter heading here, because there's an obvious ending. We have a second response. So the first response ended in the cost of following Jesus, and this response is showing the rejection of the power of Jesus. They don't want God's glory in their place. And in the country of the Gadarenes, they don't want God there. They reject him. It's too powerful for them. They don't understand it. They don't want it. And so um, we see really primarily Jesus' authority over every force in the world, in the universe, even the unseen forces. And number two, we see that that should elicit a response in us. So take time meditating on the power and wonder of Jesus as he walked this earth, and think about how you would respond in some of these instances and how you need to respond to who he is in your life, that you would bring more glory to his name. Let that be your meditation today.